everyone, this is Nikki. I'm here today to do some masculine cards. I'm so excited to have you here. We are going to stamp one time and create two masculine cards so that you can get your masculine cards taken care of, and we're going to create this wonderful geometric design. So just make sure you stick with me. I have lots of tips and tricks, and if you haven't done it yet, hit that like and subscribe button. That helps me out a ton. So we'll get right into this video. So this stamp is a 6x6 stamp. So I am going to use my MISTI so that I can stamp it a couple of times to make sure I get it very dark. I'm using watercolor paper here, and I'm using a brush that's got an anti-static powder. Now when you're using watercolor paper, I feel like you need to stamp a couple of times if you're going to be heat embossing, and that's what we're going to do. So ultimately we are going to watercolor this image. So I'm going to stamp it. I really like the geometric design, and I decided that I wanted it to be black and do some really dark colors for my coloring. So I'm using VersaFine Nocturne black ink. This is my favorite black ink, and it doesn't work on this paper to watercolor unless it's heat embossed. So you really want to heat emboss your ink to make your watercoloring easy. So this is a large stamp. You really need to do it a few times to get that great dark color, but this ink stays wet pretty good amount of time, so it'll be easy for us to add some clear embossing powder to it. Now when I am embossing in black, I tend to go with a black ink and a clear embossing powder. You could use black embossing powder and stamp in either black or clear. That's perfectly fine. This just gives a great look for me, and like I said, this is my favorite black ink, so a lot of times I like to use this black ink because it gets so dark. So I end up stamping this at least 3 times because we're going to use this image for 2 cards. We need it to look great on all levels. So once I get this stamped, I'm going to use a clear embossing powder. My favorite is the Wow clear embossing, and so I have a very big jar of that. I'm gonna have to move this stuff out of the way so you can see up close. But here it is, and I tend to use a coffee filter. Now when you've got this large of an image, it would probably be better to use some type of paper. I'm definitely gonna make a mess, or to flatten out your coffee filter. But it's what I had easy and available, so I'm just gonna dust off my desk in a minute. And then apply this. You want to make sure you get every little area. So I like using a big jar like this because I can kind of make sure that I get the whole area covered. And it's hard to realize, but that's a 6x6. You know, most of the time we're working in an A2 size. And so this is a big image, which allows us to get multiple cards from it. So once I've got that, you want to flick it off. It is hard to tell where that clear embossing powder may be on your background. So you want to flick it a couple times so you're not getting random areas that are sticking to the non-image part. Skip the heating it up, so I used a heat tool, and look at how nice that looks on the background. Now we're going to use ink refills, and I think you can paint this entire thing, it's pretty crazy, with 1 to 2 drops because you're adding water to it. So I'm going to speed up the painting, and we're going to talk about the theory of masculine cards so that you can kind of have it in your head and think about other ideas and think about stamps you might have at your house that you could use in this way and create multiple cards. Okay, so theory number 1 for masculine cards. I love a geometric background. So I tend to pick those, and they really can make any type of card. These current cards that I made, I ended up putting thanks on them, but that was only because I needed to show that thanks die versus a birthday card. This would make a great birthday card. This would make all kinds of different cards if you want. My kids do enjoy having a few thank you cards, so a lot of times I will make those in masculine as well. But with this, what I'm doing for the watercolor painting, I do not consider myself an expert watercolorer, but I do know that filling in these little spaces, since they are heat embossed, is pretty easy to do. I'm just adding a little bit of water, and I'm keeping my shadow in the same direction. That is so key to making a very professional looking card, is picking where your light is coming from. So for these, I'm adding darkness for the most part to the left side, and the bottom is kind of where I kept it. So I am picking these parallelograms, which is what that shape is called, and I'm doing about every other. Now you could do multiple colors. I end up only doing green and blue, and the reason is because to me it's easier to break up this in two colors than to try to figure out the best, I guess, placement and to keep it consistent looking when you're doing multiple colors. So for me, something like this, just doing it in two colors is a lot easier because I can just make sure that my two colors are not touching. I'm kind of going around and doing about every other one is green versus trying to come up with 3 or 4 colors. It's a lot more difficult. So I did that with this card. I'm going to pop it up. I did multiple colors. That is so much more complicated than doing the 2 colors. Plus, I feel like for the masculine cards, 2 colors is fine. And it does not have to be green and blue. I know a lot of people get aggravated that I love blue and green, so that I tend to do a lot of blue and green cards, but I have an entire list of colors that I love. I really love adding in orange and red, all different colors. So you can pick any colors. Pick your husband or whoever you're giving it to's favorite colors. No big deal. Now, if you weren't going to use every scrap here, you don't have to go way up to the top here because this is 6 inches, but I'm going to use every scrap. And I know there's little areas where that black line is not quite as dark, but you can easily fill that in with a pen. So that's one of the other reasons I love black embossing, because I can easily fix mistakes. So I'm going to start on the blue, and I'm not going to show all of this coloring of the blue, but I wanted to go over a few quick things with you. First of all, the colors that I'm using are re-inkers from Catherine Pooler. I'm using Juniper Mist and Eucalyptus. These are very beautiful navy-ish and dark green that I just love. They go together very well. And with a re-inker, you're hardly using any ink to create this. Like I said, I think I could do this entire thing with 1 drop of ink from each color. The other things that make watercolor painting really easy to do and keep your paper from warping is using some type of tape to hold down your image. So you see that I've just got the blue Scotch tape I used. It works well for this, and I'm holding it down to a silicone mat. So, or silicone, whatever you want to say, silicone mat, and that is just my surface. With this mat, you can also put your ink on it, which is really nice. So just a couple things. The brush is a fine tip, I believe from Altenew. It's a water brush, so I can add extra water by squeezing it. Most of the time I am not adding much extra water, just a little bit to blend, and then adding my color with the tip. Okay, so this is really looking very nice. I'm gonna zoom in on the card and show you what we're gonna make next, because we need to watercolor 2 more things for our cards, and it's this parallelogram here. So I actually had a die that cuts this, which just happened to be the same as the background. You could easily cut yourself something this shape, but since I had a die, I went on and put that down because I'm going to make a watercolor wash, and I'm going to cut it out with that die. That's where I'm gonna put my things. So I'm just adding some water to my watercolor, taking those same dots of water and just coloring in an area that I can die cut. So we're starting with our green one. We're going to do 1 green and 1 blue. And for those of you that don't know what watercolor wash is, it usually means kind of an ombre look. So I'm adding darker on the left, just like I did on my images. You know, the left side was my darker area, so you want to have this consistent as well. So I'm taking a darker green, and then I'm adding more water as I go towards the edge so that it gets an ombre type effect. And I feel like this just gives a great spotlight look to your sentiment, so that it just shows up. People notice, and it just looks so cool. Okay, and so I did the blue one, and this is just a scrap piece of watercolor paper too. So I'm really trying to use all of my scraps here. And once this dries, I can die cut it, and let me show you what that looks like. Okay, so I die cut them. The edges are kind of white, and I don't like that, so I'm going to show you a quick trick to make it look like it's just cardstock. I'm going to add the ink that I use. So this is Juniper Mist. It's the same re-inker for this that I used. The ink refill is what we painted with, and now we're using the actual ink pad in the color to go around the edges, make them slightly darker, and it just gives it a more pro look. I really love it. Okay, another tip. The way that you use your scraps from the 6x6 piece, I feel like, is to use a die cut. Now you could chop this up with your paper trimmer, but I feel like you get better pieces if you'll just cut the area out that you need. And so I am using the Waffle Flowers A2 dies, and I'm looking to make sure this is a big enough area, but it's a 4 by 5.25 die, and that way it cuts out the perfect front of my card and it leaves me lots of spare pieces. So let's look at what we get left. We're going to build that card, but first I want to show you the other one. So the full front I did with some string. I just took some black thread and wrapped it around this edge just to kind of make the sentiment stand out a little bit. I just really like that effect. And then I glued the word thanks. Like I said, this could be happy birthday, anything. You want to watch your font on a masculine card. I think it looks better with a blockier font. This one did great. Backed it with black cardstock as well just to give it that extra effect, and added the sentiment, and then that card is finished. Now let's cut up these shreds and make a card out of this. So I've got these pieces and I may not use all of them, but this is where I'm starting. Got this funny piece right here, so I'm going to cut everything into strips because I've decided I want to do 3 strips across this front. You will see that that's a black piece of cardstock with the same stamp on the front. So I could just leave this plain black, that would be perfectly fine, but I decided that adding heat embossing with that parallelogram stamp just looked really cool. So basically I took a black piece of paper and I clear heat embossed on it. Now these don't match up to each other because they're cut in different directions. I'm just putting them away that seems to make sense. So just some of these little images kind of almost look like they go right beside each other even though they don't. So I switched my little pieces around to what made the most sense to me. And then now I'm going to glue these on. I do always advise some type of T-ruler that's just holds to the top of your paper, and it helps you get these lines perfectly straight, and you're going to notice if those aren't straight enough. So make sure you consider doing that, or do something just to get it lined up evenly. You want to keep your spaces even. It just makes a geometric card look more symmetrical to have all of those things lined up. So I'm going to put this 3rd stripe on, and then I'm going to add the sentiment, and that is it for this card. So what we've gone over today, just a quick reminder, we went over doing geometric patterns for masculine cards, color choices, we talked about fonts, we talked about saving our scraps and using them on cards. So hopefully you got some fun information out of this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure that if you haven't done it yet, follow me on social media. I'm going to pop up everywhere that I am. I am at Nikki Hearts Cards on all of these, and I would love to see you on the different social media platforms. I have popped up the final cards, and I'm going to also put a video up that I think that you would enjoy if you liked this one. Okay, have a great day, guys. Bye.